Ooh, the lights went off. So somebody's leaning against the switch. I was telling our friends from Monsanto, there are two things that really get a group assembled at Meredith. It's good content and food, and you've hit the ball out of the park on that front. So we have a big crowd assembled this morning, and really do want to say thank you to our friends from Monsanto and Fleshman Hilliard for being here today. So my name's Scott Mortimer. I'm the publisher and general manager of the Meredith Agri-Media brands here at Meredith, and that includes Successful Farming and Living the Country Life. So it's today's part of our ongoing coverage of all the events that are going on with the World Food Prize, and there's a lot of things going on. We're doing a lot of coverage on the website and through all our media properties, and this is just part of that ongoing coverage that we do. So I often get times asked, why did you do at Meredith Agri-Media? And I will tell you, there's 4 or 5 reasons, but one of the reasons was there is no company in America that has the connection to the farmer like we do, back to 1902 with Successful Farming, and then to 100 million women that we reach with properties every month. And when we think about less than 1% of our population is involved in farming, there's a real opportunity to tell the message for America's farmers and America's farm families out there. So we're very, very excited about that. And you may wonder why Monsanto, why do they want to talk to food editors and to people that talk to consumers? Well, they're part of the food chain. And I think that's the exciting part that we'll get a chance to hear more and learn more about here today. So I'm pleased and honored to introduce today Natalie Rosenblum. She is Monsanto's VP of Sustainable Ag Partnerships. She oversees their development of public and private partnerships to improve food security, conserve natural resources, and improve the livelihoods of farms around the world through the adoption of new technologies. She's been at Monsanto for 13 years in roles ranging from global environmental stewardship and harmonization of global regulatory structures. That's kind of a mouthful. So anyway, we're pleased to have you here today, and Natalie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks all of you for the chance to be here today. I have to start by expressing my appreciation for the work you do here. You have saved me so many times from got home later than I expected from work, need to have dinner on the table in 20 minutes, and I have no plan. So thank you so much for me and my family for that. And I also want to just recognize this frittata we had this morning. Thank the people who prepared it. It was very delicious. Because really, it was wonderful. The work you do is really excellent. But we really appreciate the chance to be here because, as Scott said, we are the beginning of the food chain. We are a company that develops seeds and tools, information that can help farmers produce more of the food we all need while conserving natural resources and protecting our environment. And so we focus a lot on farmers. And they plant our seeds, they get a harvest, they take that to a grain processor, which eventually goes to a food manufacturer, finally to a retailer or a restaurant, and then to the consumer. So our customer is the farmer, and we're many steps removed from the consumer. But your readership and a number of consumers out there, many folks have questions about safety of their food, where their food comes from, and we need to do a better job and want to do a better job of reaching them and answering their questions and getting their feedback. So we really appreciate the chance to be here today because you do play kind of a unique role, I think, in enabling us to try to reach and share some information with folks who would be interested in some of these questions. I'm going to now introduce Rob Fraley. He's our Chief Technology Officer. He and 2 other individuals are being recognized this week with the World Food Prize, which is such a wonderful event here in Des Moines. He's had a really busy week, but I know he's really happy to be here. So thanks to you, Rob.
Appreciate it. We'll get Natalie back up here to talk about some of her work in Africa and some of the other areas that she's in. But again, I want to say thanks, and it's great to be here. And I tell you, it was really good food. I like that as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what was in there. You may not know it, but Monsanto provides about 25% of the vegetable seed in the United States, and you just enjoyed some of our peppers and some of our tomatoes in there, and hope you liked them. I'll talk a little bit more about the science that goes in there, but I don't want to scare anybody. I'm just going to tell you up front, we're not going to talk about genes. We're not going to talk about DNA. We're going to really talk about what we do, why it's important, and how I think you can help us with some really important conversations. I want to thank Scott and Steve for helping set this up. It's great to have this opportunity. Just a little bit about me. I grew up on a small farm in Illinois, about 100 miles south of Chicago. Schooled in the Midwest in Illinois, and then moved to California, and came back to St. Louis. And along the way, my wife Laura's here is with me, and I'm glad she could join us today, Laura. And we have 3 kids. And personal hobbies for me, I love to garden, and I do a lot of that, and I like to cook, and so it makes for a great connection. And on the side, we do a little bit with farming and helping growers get new seeds. So it's a great mix. And if I seem distracted, I'm not going to be checking the Cardinal score, but I wouldn't mind it if anybody told me where they're at. But they don't play till Friday, so it was a lot more distracting the other night when I was talking and they were behind. That really bugged me. So let me talk a little bit about the company and where we're going and why we're here. This is our strategy. It's we try to use new technology so we can produce more and help farmers increase their yields. So many of the tools that we develop let farmers use less stuff, less chemicals, less fertilizers, less water, and that's important. And the reason the seeds are so important and the technology has been so adopted is it really helps farmers improve their yields, reduce their risks, and in many ways change their lives and their farming operations. And that's who we are as a company. I'm here because of the World Food Prize, and you, I'm sure, probably know more about the World Food Prize than I can tell you. It was founded by Dr. Borlaug, who is one of the famous Iowans, and he won the Nobel Prize for the work he did to bring new wheats to Africa, and before that, India and Pakistan, that really changed agriculture and saved billions of lives. And he created the World Food Prize Award, and it's given to folks who've contributed to reducing starvation or providing food. And I was privileged, along with Dr. Mary Del Chilton and Dr. Mark Van Montague, to be the recipient of the award this year. So I've had a great week in Des Moines. I come to Iowa a lot because you may not know it, but our biggest research facility is just in Ankeny. Literally, I come into the airport, I walk across the parking lot, and it's our key research center for breeding and producing new seeds. Those of you who know where Huxley is our center for precision agriculture. So taking all of this new computer capability and packaging it in a way that farmers can farm better is right here. In fact, between our research sites and our seed production sites, we employ about 1,000 people in Iowa, and it's the second largest state outside of Missouri where we conduct our business. And obviously, so many farmers and customers are part of it. So this is actually the 3rd time I've been to Iowa this week, and I loved it. It's my longest time because the World Food Prize is such an incredible forum. I had a chance to have dinner on Sunday night with Ambassador Quinn. What an individual in terms of what he's done to create the importance of this prize and tying it into the Borlaug legacy and to the community in an incredible fashion. I mean, this has become a world event here in Des Moines this week, and it's exciting. It's scientists, ag ministers, presidents, folks from all around the world are coming to talk basically about food production, food security, and how we can use tools in agriculture to mitigate environmental effects, and all really critically important. So it starts with the ceremony tomorrow night will be recognized, but the part that, besides the personal recognition part that's most important, is I give the I give the ambassador and the World Food Prize so much credit for picking biotechnology, because it has been controversial, and we'll spend some time talking about that. But this has really created a wonderful opportunity for dialogue and really refreshing the communication that we need. And I spent all morning having breakfast with community leaders and some of the women business leaders from across Des Moines, and we talked a lot about what is it that this science is, what does it need to do, how do we talk about it, and we addressed a lot of questions. But science and the World Food Prize are one part. I want to come back and talk about Dr. Borlaug for a couple of reasons. First of all, he is the patron behind the award, and he's an incredible individual. I had the opportunity to know Norman the last 20 years of his life. The first time I met him, we were in a meeting where the goal was to actually create an organization to help transfer technology to developing countries. Because early on, the first thing we wanted to make sure is we didn't create a situation where it was have and have-nots, that it was only farmers in the U.S., but farmers everywhere, and that organization has prospered. And more important than that, within the first 10 minutes of talking to Dr. Borlaug, he was a pretty direct and straightforward guy. He told me about everything I needed to know about agriculture and food production, and a lot of those lessons I've kept with me for many years. He was a very, very special friend, and that really reinforces for me and makes this award so special, because I know he up there somewhere. I thank him for that. The decision on the award, as I said, was a courageous one, and really has opened up the dialogue. And what we're here to talk about is where we need to go with biotech from both the communication and the science. So as we move forward, I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about what we do as a company and why it's important. And the first point was we are in the vegetable seed business, and tomatoes and peppers and all kinds of food products. We're really using the science of breeding and these new tools to create a whole new spectrum of colors and foods and flavors. So in the meal you had, those peppers, those Bellafina peppers, are all different colors. And one of the coolest things is going to a grocery store, getting a 4-pack that has yellow, orange, red, and purple. Little miniature peppers all in one pack. Everybody hates to buy that big pepper and throw it all away, but if you can buy those 4 little ones. Same thing from a consumption. We work with a lot of companies to make foods more attractive, and we can use our tools to change color, to change taste. The little tomatoes here, I'll tell you a story on those. Those are called Zima tomatoes, and they're orange and they're super sweet. And everybody loves them. In fact, my daughter Catherine can't get enough cherry tomatoes. And then I talk to folks and say, well, you realize that all of those products are genetic modification. That Zima tomato has a mutation that blocks the conversion of orange to red, and that's why it's orange. And it's so sweet because we've been able to identify all the different genes in the tomato plant that are important for sugar and sweetness and package them all into that fruit. And that's the beauty of the science and what we can create. And kids love it. I think the only thing my daughter loves more than the Zima tomatoes are the seedless grapes. And you talk about a marvel of technology. A seedless grape has a mutation in the seed coat, and that's why the seed doesn't form. Makes sense, right? Really nice genetic modification. Then you run into the problem, though, if it doesn't make a seed, how do you get the next plant? Well, the way that's done technologically is the part of the plant that produces the grape is grafted onto another rootstock, and they're just propagated. So a seedless grape is a marvel of technology, of genetic modification and engineering, to be able to do and produce all of these plants. And a lot of people don't realize that we are continuing to modify our foods using all of these wonderful tools of breeding and genetic modification. And the biotechnology tools are just one more step that's more precise, that enables us to do more and more. One of the areas that we work on here in Iowa is corn, most important crop to the state. And I always like to remind people that about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, corn was about the size of my little finger, and it was genetic modification, that created the kind of corn we recognize in Iowa today, and that is the mainstay of the ag economy and a lot of our food and feed and energy industry. And we do a lot of our breeding, and as I said, a lot of our research here in Iowa. So it's really been key for us. And these tools are all being applied, to corn and soybean and the crops. We have remarkable abilities now to enhance how we produce these crops, giving them better and better characteristics, continually to increase their yields. And a lot of that research is done here in Ankeny. Other areas that we're involved with is a lot of lab research on coming up with new methods to help farmers control insects and diseases. We've created new genes for protecting crops against drought, and the importance of all these tools is going to be magnified in the future, because the world population is going to continue to increase. We are going to have a lot more people with us in just a few years. The UN just revised upward their projections. So put it in perspective. Today, there's 7.2 billion people on the planet. By 2050, there will be 9.6. That's a huge increase, 33%, 37 years away. I added it on. That means I'll be 98. I think I'll make it, but I know my kids will. And in all seriously, this is a challenge of the next generation. But to try to magnify how critical it is, that means we have to double food production around the world in the next 37 years. And that is a daunting task. And it's going to be even more complicated because we're going to have to deal with climate change and global warming, and pests and bugs and weeds and insects are going to continue to evolve and become challenges. And that's one of the reasons we're investing so much in new tools, because it's going to take all the technology and tools we can. To make that big number seem real, I always talk about it this way. By 2050, we will have to produce more food than has been produced in the entire history of the world to meet that demand. It is a daunting task, but I think we can do it. But the challenge is where we need your help is how to talk to consumers so that this doesn't seem scary, that it seems natural and part of an important journey. Another area you might be interested in, just in terms of things we do that you may not know about, you probably read or heard about some of the challenges with bee. There's a disease out there called colony collapse disorder, where beehives are experiencing threat. And as you know, bees are pollinators, and pollinators are what gives us, crops for the future. What we've worked out is what's causing the problem. And the problem is a mite that attaches to the bee and injects into the little bee some viruses. And we're now starting to figure out, how do you break that cycle? How do you control the virus? How do you control the mite? And I think that's a pretty cool story, and we'd love to share that with you. The other area that I talked about is the precision farming. This is going to be so exciting. We talked about it earlier. That combine, or the red tractor that you see when you're driving to Iowa City or to along the interstate, has more computer power in it than the first spaceship that went to the moon. And that gives farmers the absolute ability to precisely, meter their instruments through the field. But it also gives us now an ability to transmit information into that tractor or into that cab to help that farmer plant his field in a different way that optimizes and reduces inputs. And this ability to take the advances that are now being created in biology with information technology is super cool. You may have read that just 2 weeks ago we announced that we were acquiring a big data company from San Francisco, from the Silicon Valley, who specializes in understanding agricultural data and predicting weather. And they have taken this to a level that no one else has ever been able to achieve in terms of they can literally project the history of every single corn or soybean field for the last 30 years in the United States, use that information to understand the yields and the historical weather patterns, and take that information forward to give farmers absolutely specific recommendations on what they should do this season based on the stage of the crop, the weather patterns, and what's going to happen over the next few weeks. And it's that kind of tool, the advances in biology and information technology that are coming to the farm. And we think that will benefit, not only the farmers here in Iowa and Illinois that have those tractors and computers, but what we're seeing is that even the smallest and poorest farmers in the world have cell phones. And to be able to transmit to them a text that says the wind patterns have changed, the moths are flying your way, they will lay their eggs in 2 days, they will hatch in 3 days, get ready for some type of interaction. That is the technology that's available now using these kind of tools. So we're really excited. And then on the biotech side, I helped develop Roundup Ready soybeans and some of the corn technologies. What's exciting to me is there's going to be just a wave of new technologies that are going to help farmers, continue to improve their yields by giving them better tools for controlling diseases and weeds and insects, and really new tools that can literally change the yield of that crop and help provide resistance to drought. So this is where I transition, and I ask for your help, and want to really open up the dialogue, because I would tell you that my company and my industry have done a pretty good job of talking to farmers, and we appreciate what successful farming and that side of your business has enabled us in terms of our communication. And that's why these tools have been so adopted by the farming community. Just to put it in perspective, when you're driving by or flying by a cornfield or a soybean field, or if you get down to see a cotton field, 90% of the fields in the United States use a biotechnology trait. It has really dramatically changed farming. And same thing would be true for Argentina or Brazil, and we're seeing great progress in China and India with these tools as well. But the challenge we have is we've been so focused on the farmer that we haven't reached out to the consumer, and that's where we need to rethink our approach, and that's really where we want to have the dialogue on how we work together, what projects, what mediums, what can we do differently. Because it's funny, Natalie and I have done a lot of sessions, particularly over the last 3 or 4 months, where we've met with consumer groups, we've met with moms, we've met with schools, we've met with people who like us and people who don't like us. And the one thing that we have learned, and it's really changed our thinking, is as a company, just like you, we're in the Midwest, we're probably a bit conservative, and we saw our job as providing technology to growers. We sell seed to farmers. The way consumers look back at us isn't as a seed company. They look at us as the first step in the food chain, and we now need to behave and be able to provide the transparency. We need to interact at the emotional level. We need to deal and talk in terms that people want to hear without scaring them with the science, but providing the understanding and the comfort and the trust to move the technology forward. And so that's our task. Natalie's been helping to lead that effort, and I'd just like her to maybe say a few things about that, and also maybe what we're doing in some other parts of the world.
Sure. Well, I'll start by talking a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in partnerships in Africa. One in particular, several years ago, we identified drought tolerance as a really important trait for us to work on, both through breeding and biotechnology for U.S. farmers. But we have a history of sharing or donating our research and development work with public institutions for humanitarian uses in different parts of the world. And a number of the people who are at the World Food Prize, who have dedicated their lives to fighting hunger and poverty, expressed to us how important something like drought tolerance could be for smallholder farmers in Africa. Because white maize or corn is a staple crop in Eastern Africa. 300 million Africans depend on it as their primary food source. And these farmers are women, primarily women farmers, amazing women, who farm an area not much larger than most suburban backyards. That's what they have to feed their family for the year. And it's usually the only income that they have as well. They face so many challenges, but drought's a really big one. And unfortunately, with climate change, that's only likely to get worse. And so we partnered with a number of different organizations that were really focused on trying to develop better tools for these women. You could switch the slide. You could see a number of them on the slide here. It includes African governments. It is an African-led project by an African not-for-profit organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. CIMMIT is the public research institution that was the home of Dr. Borlaug. And they have an amazing history of trying to provide benefit for farmers around the world, these smallholder farmers. And it's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Howard Buffett Foundation, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. Our role was to provide corn lines from around the world that have better drought tolerance, as well as the drought tolerance biotechnology gene that is being launched in the United States this year, and a biotechnology trait that provides built-in resistance to insects, which many farmers around the world have been using for decades, but African farmers did not have access to. And we're really about leveraging the best of all of our organizations to try to bring more stability to these farmers in their ability to grow food for their family every year. There's about 60 African scientists on the ground doing this, and they've been really busy. They've been working for the last few years, and we're really excited that as we're speaking right now, the first hybrids, this is called the Water Efficient Maize for Africa project, the first WEMA hybrid seeds are being delivered to these women farmers in Kenya right now. And these are developed through conventional breeding. We have a whole pipeline of seeds that are going to have even more drought tolerance, insect protection, and resistance to some of the troublesome diseases in these sub-Saharan African countries. It's a great example of where these, through partnership, we can work together to try to help some of these women farmers who are facing some challenges that, frankly, it's hard. I'm always humbled and inspired seeing what they deal with.
Good. I thought what we'd do, we were going to open up for questions. I know there's probably a couple questions that are top of mind, so I was kind of going to lead the witness here, if that's okay, and just talk about a couple of things. So that maybe a good place to start is I've tried not to talk much about the science. There's always a starting question of what is a GMO, what is a genetically modified organism, and be honest, it gets harder and harder to describe what it is because you have to do it against the context that man has been genetically modifying and selecting organisms, that have become our dairy cows, that have become our corn crop, that have become our little cherry tomatoes or our Beneforti broccoli for years, thousands of years to be exact. And what biotechnology does, and the technology that I helped invent, actually gives us a way of putting that gene into that plant very precisely, and then regenerating that plant and breeding seeds just like traditional breeding. And that's what the hoopla is all about, is that it's a different method of putting a gene in that is actually even more precise and more safe than the breeding that's gone on for thousands of years, where breeders combine the genes from the male and the female and create the new seeds that we really don't understand which genes have moved. So that is a GMO, a genetically modified organism, and that's the technology. Natalie, the next big question is always, are GMOs safe? And I know you've probably only gotten that question once today, right? So
we get this question a lot, and it's a very natural question because, of course, people are really concerned about, the safety of the food that they eat. I am a scientist, I'm an employee, but I am a mom first and foremost. There is nothing that matters as much to me as the safety and health of my family. And I feel absolutely confident feeding my children foods produced from biotechnology crops, because I know that these are the most tested and studied food products on the market today. I've had the chance to actually review some of the research. I realize that, most parents don't have the time to do that. But hundreds of scientific organizations and health and safety authorities around the world, including the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, National Academy of Science from here in the US, but also many, many other countries. There's a long, long list of premier institutions that have looked at literally thousands of independent studies and come to the conclusion that crops produced through biotechnology pose no more risk than crops produced through conventional breeding methods. And as I think you mentioned earlier, these products have been available. They've been eaten for 20 years, and there's not been one single case of any sort of concern around human or animal safety associated with these products. So that I think is an incredible safety record. And the other piece of this that really matters to me when we talk about safety is I'm really interested in the safety for my children here and now. I'm also interested in their safety and their health for the future. And as Rob mentioned, that date 2050, that's stuck with me, because one of my sons is going to be...
You're going to be a lot younger than I am in 2050.
Well...
Once I got to 98, I don't know, I kind of checked out on that one.
But one of my sons will be about the age I am today. And I have to ask myself, what kind of world is he going to live in? Is there going to be enough food for him, for everyone? Will he be able to afford it? What will these challenges of water scarcity do in terms of just the stability of things out there? So these are the kinds of things that are really important, I think, and on the minds of a number of folks out there, that we want to try to help provide information and facts that I think all parents are interested in having factual information.
So safety is always the place I like to start, because until you can work through the safety discussion, all the other things kind of pale. And I've avoided talking to you about the toxicological tests and the studies that are all done. Suffice it to say that these are the most thoroughly studied seeds and plants ever produced by man, and every regulatory body in the world has confirmed. And that still doesn't stop the urban legends and some of the rumors from occurring. But for those of you who want to dig one level deeper, in that little packet on your desk, there's a corn thumb drive, which is actually made out of biodegradable corn plastic, that on it contains all the 1,000 studies that have been done that absolutely tell you the same thing I did. So if you need a little fact base, and the reason I push it so hard is, probably the thing that frustrates me the most is these products have been used for 20 years. There's not been a single food or feed safety issue. I'll just repeat that again. Not been a single food, feed, or safety issue with this technology. If you go to the CDC website, they'll tell you that 60 million Americans had food illnesses last year, salmonella or E. coli. There's not one single issue with biotechnology crops. That's how safe this is. And a scientist usually doesn't come up in front of you and say, this is safe, because, there's always these theoretical questions. This food is safe. It's been proven for 20 years, and that's key. And that's the starting point for the next set of conversations on the benefits and some of the other areas. Along there you've got my card and contact information, and we would really love to, extend the dialogue, in any of these areas, whether it's how we can make the next different color of these vegetables, which are all different genetic modifications of the color gene, or we have a product called Beneforte broccoli that has enriched levels of glucosinolates, which is a key antioxidant that is really interesting from a health perspective. And we talk a lot about the grain, and obviously that's what puts this chicken on the shelf as economically as we can. Being able to produce more corn more effectively, for this country has a huge benefit in terms of food prices. For the rest of the world, we still have to export all that Iowa corn to China and Europe and around the world. And a lot of people, biotech has touched all of these foods in one way or another. A lot of people don't realize it, that 95% of the cheeses that are made in the United States use chymosin, which is the protein that causes the milk to curdle, and that's all produced by biotechnology. So much of our food products for the last 20 years have been touched by the technology. So maybe we should just open it up. I mean, food safety is the big one. I'm sure we'll have a conversation on food labeling. That's always an important one. But what else would you like us to talk about that as we think about exploring areas or issues? Sure, in the back.
Just a quick question. In the average supermarket, how much of the grocery store produce would you figure is actually GMO?
A pure GMO in the absolute technical sense of gene transfer, the way I described, using the technology I developed, would be pretty small. It'd probably be a few squash, maybe some papayas. Those have been the examples. But in the broad sense of genetic modification, everything that's in the vegetable shelf today has been, recreated through genetic modification. I told the story yesterday that, I mentioned earlier, I grew up on a farm. I think when I was 6 to 10 years old, what I would do on the weekends, my grandparents had the corner grocery store in town, and I was the stock boy. And stocking grocery stores back in 1960s were really easy because you had sweet corn in July, and you had tomatoes, and everything else came in cans. And it's really important because when you think about everything we have today, these have all been products of really sophisticated breeding, engineering technology that has created this wave of new foods. And what's exciting to me is all of these tools are going to give us a whole new wave of enriched foods, better colors, better consumer perception, and it'll all be through the genetic modification techniques that we're developing. And then if you go to the other foods, basically anything that has, corn or soybeans, either oils or proteins, has come from a genetically modified, crop, because 95% of the corn and soybeans in the U.S. are GMO technology. So it's just about everywhere. Yep. Sure.
As I travel around and talk to people, it just seems that this is such a case of people fearing what they don't understand. And, I think as much as you can explain and use analogies and metaphors to describe the processes, that we're not, I think there's this vision that we're taking some extraterrestrial matter and planting it in fruit or vegetable. Yep. And it seems to me that the people that are most at a loss to understand what's going on are the people that are furthest removed from farming and what actually happens. Yep. Colleagues in New York, for example, seem to be way more up in arms about GMOs than colleagues.
No, you're exactly right, and and that is we're the victim in many ways of our own success. I grew up on a small farm. My dad farmed and my grandfather farmed. When my grandfather was farming in Illinois, 60% of the people lived on the farm. And in Illinois and Iowa today, they're all doing something else. And that's great. But the linkage to the farm and to food is lost. And that's why we can't really fill that gap talking about the science and the genes. You're exactly right, and that's where we need the help, is how do we talk about this differently in a different way so that we can take away the fear factors that can either block the acceptance of the technology or position it so it's so expensive or create a situation where it doesn't work. I mean, the story that scares me the most is what's happened with vaccines in a large part of the world, where the stories about danger have kept people from using it. And from a science perspective, I'm sure you know that all of this started by a British researcher attempting to show a link to autism. And about 2 or 3 years ago, all of his studies were shown to be fraudulent. And that person has probably created more damage to society because diseases that should have been eradicated and people's lives who should have been saved have been lost because of an urban legend. and that's a travesty. But even if you think about food, I mean, people fought pasteurization of milk for years. Yeah, even here in Iowa, when you were planting hybrid corn in the 40s and 50s, there were countries around the world that would ban hybrids because they were going to be dangerous. And it's not uncommon to have this reaction, and we're just not very good at it. We can talk to farmers and get successful farming to help us do it even better, but talking to consumers is, that's where we need different words and different approaches. Sure.
I am fairly pro-GMO, but I get in a lot of debates with people, and I follow the Facebook groups that are very anti-GMO. And I often see people touch on the Starlink corn incident. Could you just kind of touch on that? What exactly happened so that we can be better educated about
Sure.
the science behind that?
And you have full permission to use my email address to get all the information you would ever want, and you have my commitment that our team will provide that. So Starlink occurred about 11 years ago, or 12. I remember it very vividly because Monsanto was going through its IPO that day. So I was in New York getting ready to try to raise funding to launch the new Monsanto, when the front page was biotech and Starlink and GMOs. So it's pretty vivid. What happened there was a company was developing a product in corn that had a particular regulatory test that it got a result that wasn't dangerous, but it was such that they needed to do more testing if they were going to label the corn product for use in food. They made a very bad decision to market the product anyway, thinking that they could just keep it in feed, because most of the corn is used either in ethanol or feed facilities, but some of it got, through the grain elevator system, got into food products. And I think the one that was probably best known was tacos, and it was true. It shouldn't have been there, given the permission they had from the USDA, but it was. And it was a violation. And that's all that happened. There was never a safety issue. And the product has been approved and is now used in that fashion, but they got it into a place where it shouldn't have been, and that created enough emotion for the folks who don't like this technology to create a whole story around Starlink, and that's where we've dealt with. So the company screwed up because they shouldn't have gone forward, and frankly, I don't think if you've talked to folks in the USDA today, they will ever grant another approval that you can use corn for feed but not for food. And as a company, we would never do that. We would wait the extra time to do the additional study and get those approvals. But that's what happened. Mm-hmm. Sure.
What are you doing about the part of the organic movement? It grows in popularity. Groceries and restaurants push it because of the higher margins that it brings with it. So on that front, what are your plans to combat that?
None. Absolutely none. We stand for choice. So if a company wants to go through the extra effort of trying to grow a crop and doing it without, so basically under the USDA labeling, a biotech crop can't use GMO seeds, and it can't use chemistries. So it has to be grown free of those materials, and that gives them the GMO, or gives them the organic label, and that's key. And that's absolutely fine. And if folks want to do that, that's great. I think there's, I mentioned to you that 60 million people in the U.S. have foodborne diseases every day, and that's probably another study sometime as to what the sources of those are, but I don't really want to go there. The only issue I have with the organic companies, and I'll just be candid here, when you take a look at this distribution of people and views on GMOs, it's fair to say that somebody who's worked for Monsanto for 30 years is an advocate. I understand the science, I understand the safety, I understand the benefits, and I believe this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to tell you why. So I'm an advocate. There's a small population on the other side that fight this technology, and there's really three profiles. There's environmental groups like Greenpeace who raise money. If you ever go to their website, they'll say, we need a campaign against Monsanto in San Diego tomorrow, please send $5. This is their biggest fundraising they've ever had. I met with Greenpeace about 15 years ago in London when we were trying to see if we could resolve it. And usually in Europe, you get through your first glass of wine before business starts. And basically before they even poured the wine, they told us that, we've been fighting whaling for 35 years. We've made more money in the last year fighting against GMOs than we ever did against whaling. So there's a profit incentive. We understand that. That's the way it goes. There are also some of the organic food companies who think that they can create the food scare and drive market share their direction. And I understand the rationale for that. And then there are folks who have a deep emotional beliefs, and I don't want to minimize that. So there's economic and emotional reasons that create that group who are really outspoken and critical. But importantly, that big group in the middle, which I think we need to reach, are still very movable. They don't wake up every morning talking about GMOs or thinking about it as a top-of-mind issue, and that's where we've got to do a better job. And to give the folks who are critical of this their credit, I mean, they have been far more effective in using social media and websites than we have, and that's something that I think you'll see change. Natalie, I know you spent a lot of time on this.
Well, I very much agree. We want people to have choices, and we think it's wonderful that they have that choice of organic. What I think is really troublesome to me, though, is that there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much scaring that's going on out there. And I think most people really are interested in factual information that helps them make good decisions around if they, the safety and these sorts of things. And so that's where I think we want to try to be out there answering their questions. There's actually a website that's been started called GMO Answers, which has, it's a place online, because a lot of people get information now online, where they can go and get, they can ask independent experts. So these are people who are not getting compensation from Monsanto, and they can ask them whatever questions they have about GMOs and have a, online discussion about it. These people who are participating as experts, they're doing it because they really believe in what this technology does as well. Some of them have dedicated their entire lives to studying and understanding it, and they want to get that information out there to consumers.
Let me just bridge from that question to one that the last one. We'll stay here and answer as many questions as you want, but I think it's really important to jump from there to the labeling discussion, because it's exactly the reverse of what everybody thinks. As a company, we are absolutely supportive of voluntary labels. So just like I said, if an organic grower or a food company wants to market a GMO-free product or an organic product, that's exactly fine. That's free enterprise. That's how the market should work. The only thing I'd like to see, if I could wave my magic wand, is I'd like to see either the USDA or the FDA to come out with a precise label of what GMO-free means. And you might have noted that they've just done that in meat a couple of months ago. There's actually now a GMO-free label that talks about the feeding requirements for an animal so that the meat cuts would look as GMO-free, and that's great. I mean, people understand the rules, and we can play by that. So we're absolutely supportive, and that never gets reported. Let me say it one more time. We are absolutely supportive of the consumer's right to choose and companies' right to label their products as GMO-free. And you would think, well, then what is this discussion about? Why are we fighting in California? Why are we fighting in Washington State? Well, here's what's going on. That same group over here that's funding a lot of the mischief is funding the labeling bill. It's not good enough for them to have voluntary labels. They are trying to drive this to a mandatory label. What is a mandatory label? When you look at the side panel on any of your food ingredients, what's labeled? The bad stuff. Salt, fats, different flavors of fats, calories, right? They would like to see another label on there saying GMO, so that the connotation is it's bad. I just told you, these products have been used for 20 years. There's not been a single food or feed safety issue with this technology. We are not going to let it have that kind of punitive label. And that's why we've invested in these campaigns against these labelings, because it doesn't make sense. And that's where we really push up against the movement. Their desire isn't really to have consumers' right to choose. Their desire is to see GMOs labeled negatively to reduce choice to have access to this technology. And that's what the discussion is. Sure.
As a consumer, I think it's much about, I think less about GMOs than I do about hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and herbicides, and those kinds of chemicals and substances to be part of the diet, and what is the implication of that? How do you think about that? That category of conversation, so to speak, versus GMOs? I know there's some overlap between the two, but how do you think about
Well, there's actually a great story. I mean, there's been, so these crops have now been planted for 20 years. You can imagine there's been, great academic studies. ISU put out one, Missouri did, where they've looked at the actual use of chemicals on biotech crops and conventional crops. And, some of the key technologies for biotechnology provide for built-in insect protection, so farmers use less insecticides, or they provide for options for better weed control. So, one of the inventions I made was Roundup Ready soybeans. So it does enable the farmer to use Roundup, but Roundup is one of the most effective and safest products, and it eliminates the use of other multiple products, so the use of the chemicals on that acre have declined. And if you step back and you just look for a soundbite response, on average, a GMO acre uses 25% less chemical inputs than a non-GMO. And it's a tremendous story. It's a great benefit to growers because it means less exposure, less trips over the field, less energy use, but it's a great benefit to consumers. And it's exciting. And you asked me earlier on about the use of biotechnology in GMOs and vegetables, and I talked about some, maybe a little bit of papaya and a little bit of squash. We did launch about 3 years ago biotech in sweet corn to give farmers the benefit of the bug control benefit, because in order to get that sweet corn for Memorial Day, they grow that corn in Georgia and northern Florida, which has a lot of bugs. So to get that perfect ear of sweet corn, and I've been down to these farms many times, you basically have to spray every day. With the biotech corn, and we market several different breaks, we reduce those sprays to once a week or less. And that's the kind of benefit. It's hard to talk about to consumers, and it's not been a popular one for the food industry to use, because it starts with the discussion, there are pesticides used on your foods, and this technology reduces it. So it's not a winning debate for a lot of companies to lead with. But that's the facts. I'm really proud of the record, and in other parts of the world, it's not measured in chemical residues in foods. It's literally measured by how many farmers don't have health, illness, or death because they're applying pesticides with a backpack sprayer. And instead, their crops are growing and yielding more because the gene in that seed protects them against the insects.
What's the next big thing for farmers? What are you working on? And what crops?
Great question. So from a crop perspective, we are reinvesting to get back in wheat. And that's a crop that desperately needs technology. And it's been, controversial for us. And we started once a few years ago, and then really got so much pushback from the food industry that we stopped. And then a few years later, the wheat industry, the leaders in the farm community across the U.S., Argentina, Canada, the food companies who use wheat, like the General Mills and others, and the processors, came back to us and said, we made a mistake. We need technology in wheat to improve yields. I mean, to just tell you the difference between corn and wheat, You know, if you're an Iowa farmer, you're using a new corn hybrid that was probably developed within the last 2 or 3 years. If you're a wheat farmer, you're probably using a wheat variety that your grandfather planted. And that's one of the reasons the wheat acres have declined. You know, here's a great demonstration of the benefit of this science. Look at what was grown in South Dakota and North Dakota 20 years ago. It was wheat. Look at what's grown today. It's corn and soybeans. And it's because the economics of using these biotech crops have encouraged farmers to grow more corn and soybeans because they simply make more money and there's a great market. Wheat acres have dropped about 40%. Wheat needs new technology to compete. So wheat is an important crop for us, and we're getting into that. And then we're working on a number of the energy crops. We're working in sugarcane. We're looking at some of the other opportunities. And then, you know, I mentioned on the vegetable side, we're doing a lot of work in all the vegetables that would be on your salad plate. So that's exciting from a crop perspective. From a science perspective, it's going to be information technology. It's going to be giving tools to farmers so that they can make those kind of sophisticated decisions with full information, and that's where we're going to go. And if you'd love to see any of that in action, I hope you set up a visit in Huxley. Yep, sure.
I hate to
Yep.
cut off the conversation. I do want to thank Dr. Fraley and Natalie for the presentations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I know their schedules are live, but they're certainly around to answer any questions you might have afterwards. I do want to thank all my colleagues for being here today. Thank you very much.
Scott, appreciate the time and the forum and all the support.